Yes, everyone, you know what time it is. It's your boys Jack and Dave here, and we're going to be answering a question that has sort of been on our minds here that we weren't really able to fully answer yesterday on our debate show, and it sort of has to do with this sort of potential Villa obsession, Aston Villa obsession that might be going on with Daniel Levy here. Villa's head of research, Frederick Leith, has now also decided to join Spurs' new kind of formulating or kind of being kind of formed new scouting department and team. Of course, Rob McKenzie, was also was the former Villa recruitment official as well. Just joined Spurs just now, as well as Johan Lang, who's going to be our new technical director. A lot of former Aston Villa recruitment specialists and officials coming over to Tottenham Hotspur, Dave. What's the reason behind it? There seems to be some sort of, maybe obsession or some sort of type of likingness that maybe Levy or maybe Scott Munn has with that Aston Villa recruitment team. What do you think it is that maybe they specialize in?
Look, first of all, Jack, I think it's at a very crucial time, right? This could either make Tottenham or break Tottenham, considering what we were doing was sort of working. But however, Gabanini, wanting that director of football role has probably accelerated the reason why, we've gone after the Lang and he's bringing his team in from Villa, McKenzie and left. But look, Jack, I definitely think one of the reasons is when you look at Aston Villa when Lang came in, right, or Lang or whatever way people want to pronounce it, they were a team that looked like they were sort of heading for the championship. However, since he's came in and he's brought his team in with him, he's put them on the path of on the verge of qualifying for Champions League. They're not too far away from it this year, and the guy has made really smart decisions in terms of recruitment at Aston Villa. So he's already, got a track record of showing that he can build stuff. He also worked at Copenhagen before that, Jack. But I think a lot of it, I think there's two main reasons for me, Jack. I think one of them is you look at some of the players that he's brought in at Villa, right? A lot of Spurs fans over down the last couple of years have said, why can't our recruitment be a lot more like Villa's? You go through some of the players that he's brought in. I'll get back to the likes of Emil Martinez and stuff like that, but Diego Carlos, we were rumored
I
to
remember that
be
period
interested.
when Spurs fans were kind of referencing Villa for
Mm,
a while. Yeah, during maybe Steven Gerrard sort of time, a lot of the recruitment actually was pretty impressive for
mm,
what was an unproven manager even at the time. And people were like, "Why is it that Aston Villa seemed to have?" I think what was the term they were saying? Why is it Aston Villa seemed to have more motivation or or showing
mm,
more drive to improve and succeed than even Spurs are in the recruitment department. So now I do remember that. Yeah.
mm. You look at it like Diego Carlos, a player that we were very much interested in. He ended up going to Aston Villa. Alex Moreno was a good signing. Lucas Digne was another great signing for them in at left back. They've of course brought in Clement Langley, who many said wasn't good enough for Tottenham, but I think they'd accept him as backup this year, knowing that Eric Dyer is still the backup. Pau Torres, another player many people were looking at. You go into midfield, Buendia, I think was a very shrewd signing from Norwich. I remember at the time, a lot of Spurs fans said they'd love to bring in someone like Buendia. You go Yuri Tillemans on a free. I mean, what a piece of business that was. I'd say there was a lot of clubs around Europe maybe looking at him at the time. Leon Bailey, another one. I remember when he signed, a lot of fans were going mad. He was ripping it up in Germany. Zaniolo bringing him in was a stroke of genius. Musa
But
Diaby,
were
another
those
one, Jack.
maybe those are maybe now though? I think you're now bordering and you're kind of mixing them up a little bit. Some of these
Mm,
recruitment. Because I think Diaby specifically, especially Zaniolo, I would say the last maybe more year and a half has not been as much.
mm,
The Johan Lang, Rob McKenzie, sort of
mm,
recruitment team. That's been more towards their transition into Munchie, the former
mm,
recruitment specialist, over at Sevilla. So you
mm,
can't really, I think, mix them up. I think it's sort of cut off. I think in sort of the last transfer window, especially. I don't think was any
mm,
of sort of Johan Lang of any kind. I think it was Munchie actually that was just brought in for that.
mm, mm. But like, even if you go into the homegrown, and this is an area where we will be targeting next. When you look at a lot of and I keep repeating this because I think it's very, very important for people to understand this. A lot of the contracts that are coming up to an end over the next 2 years, a lot of them are homegrown players, which means then they have to be replaced. And over the last, few years, I've argued we've had the weakest homegrown core out of most clubs in the Premier League. And I think one reason why maybe Lang is here is this reason alone is you look at it. Emilio Martinez, absolute great signing from Arsenal. I really like him as a goalkeeper. Of course, World Cup winner. Robin Olsen was also brought in as well as his backup. Matty Cash at right back, homegrown player. I would take him at Spurs, or I would have taken him at Spurs over the last few years. Mings was already there. Konza was sort of promoted. Callum Chambers, look, debatable, but I'd still argue he's better than someone like Eric Dyer and people like that. And then you go into Ollie Watkins, right? They bet us to the signing of Ollie Watkins, a player that we wanted to get out of Brentford. We failed, we couldn't, but they managed to do it. And I think that's maybe mainly a lot of the reasons why we're sort of maybe bringing Lange in here is to focus on the homegrown recruitment without really sort of being ripped off, Jack.
Yeah, I can see that. I'm sort of skeptical of certain aspects of Johan Lang and sort of that recruitment team because I think they did end up wasting a lot of money on a lot of players in sort of the foreign areas where you look at even guys like a Morgan Sanson, for example, or even some of the various sort of left backs that they brought into the club that, kind of struggled to really make a real kind of, impact into the team. I think they brought in Alex Moreno to more or less replace, Luca Digna, a guy that they actually originally had brought in for, a favorable chunk of money. And as much as I am sort of a fan of, some of the other signings that they made, I think a lot of them haven't exactly worked out maybe yet or haven't worked out in the way that they maybe expected them to. I look more towards a lot of their homegrown signings as being kind of maybe more on par, being more kind of a pretty impressive. I think some of the academy guys that they've been able to produce recently too have been pretty impressive. Jacob Ramsey, I think, is probably one of the more, talented younger players that probably isn't really spoken about, I think, enough. I think he is, a really good player and has actually been carrying that team in some of their worst periods, I think, for a while. I think he was really, really good, especially under Steven Gerrard. Then I look too, at guys like Chuck Wameka that they were able to sell for favorable amount of money. They brought through Tyrone Mings, they brought through Ezri Konsa, they brought through Ollie Watkins, they brought through Matty Cash, and then there's some other, I think, talented sort of maybe homegrown or at least sort of, at least domestic players that they've, found, within sort of the English system, the English pyramid. And that's what I've been impressed with because I think Spurs have sort of more or less struggled with that kind of over years. It feels like kind of we haven't found or unearthed as many kind of diamonds, in sort of the lower leagues like a Dele Alli or sort of like a Danny Rose or in the case of, maybe a Kyle Walker or somebody like that, right? These sort of guys that maybe were maybe more from, kind of either through the academy or just maybe out there in kind of the English pyramid that were just waiting for somebody to take a chance on them. Feels like Aston Villa were actually quite successful with that. And I maybe hope that they can bring that over to Spurs in some capacity. But I'm a little bit skeptical of some of the signings that they made, maybe more in the foreign kind of a department, kind of more from Europe and sort of outside of Europe and everything, because I haven't seen those guys even hit the ground running, considering the favorable fees that the big fees that they did pay for them. But I'm excited about a lot of these guys that are brought in too, because they are going to carry on a little bit of the data and kind of analytics department that was already being built by Paratici. And I know we'll kind of touch on him in just a second, but that was one of the biggest things that we liked about Paratici was that he did modernize a lot of the recruitment around Spurs. It was kind of left in the dark ages, a bit in the stone age of how we sort of did things. And, he was able to modernize it, kind of get it more in line with some of the bigger clubs. And Aston Villa, during that time where we were sort of complimenting them a lot for kind of data analytics and, kind of very just sort of, what we thought was very thoughtful recruitment, especially in sort of the homegrown areas. This is something that they can carry on with, and I think something that Paratici would really be happy to bring in. Guys that specialize in the data, specialize in the analytics, are more in line with the modern way of kind of going about the scouting department and seem to have a good track record in sort of the homegrown areas where we have really struggled in.
Well, like in the homegrown areas, I'd argue is where they spent the majority of their money, But they, like you said, they've got a good track record with it. With some of the other signings from across the seas, I understand what you're saying about it, but they haven't exactly shelled out large fees. Like you look at Bertrand Traore, for instance, 18 million. I think Samson was only like
15 million.
13,
Yeah.
14 million. You look at Moreno, again, he was only another 13 million. So even the guys that they are bringing in from Europe, they're nowhere near as maybe catastrophic as some of our big signings. Lascelles,
Could I be unfair to sort of compare that then with like a Pop Matasar who was under 20 million, a Bentancur who was under 20 million, and some of the other, signings like an Emerson who was around 23, 24 million. I feel like those are sort of in a way kind of comparable, and so that's what I'm sort of stacking those up against, just kind of maybe some of Paratici signings from the foreign department that were under 20 million. And Destiny Udoji was under 20 million, right? Guys like him that he was able to bring in for that sort of fee in comparison to maybe what they were doing. And it might be unfair because I'm just using, the Don's brilliant work, against theirs, but that's how I sort of see it. Maybe that's why I'm being harsh on those.
Yeah, look, I can understand what you're saying there, but I think that maybe brings us back to the homegrown recruitment, Jack. I think that's where our next area of the squad that really needs to be sort of rebuilt, and I think that's what Lang has brought in to do here. To be honest with you, because some of their biggest outlays, I think Ollie Watkins was 30 odd million. Buendia, I think, was in and around maybe similar, but they haven't really gone too far wrong. Matty Cash from the Championship, when they brought him up,
Brilliant
Ollie
signing.
Watkins was from the Championship. So, I think they are brought in here more for the homegrown
Yeah.
sort of reason. But also, one other reason, Jack, is they sold Jack Grealish and they used that money to sort of rebuild the club and get all the pieces of the puzzle in to be able to push on to where they are now. And when you look at it, we only lost Harry Kane last summer, and we do still need to put pieces of the puzzle in place to sort of make sure we can fully come out of that without really feeling um that hit. So I think that's another reason why they're here. They know how, once a club sells on their best player, they know how to rebuild it and improve it.
I think he saw a lot of success in with Paratici with the guys that he was able to bring from Europe and be able to bring from various leagues. But Paratici didn't end up making a lot of signings in sort of the homegrown areas, right? I think what was it, Jed Spence, Pop Matasar eventually, qualified as a homegrown, thank God. But I can't really even remember any sort of other sort of England players or kind of, homegrown players that Paratici was really bringing in. He did a good job in bringing in guys into the academy, sort of like June Suits Up Bell, Charlie Lancashire, these sort of guys. I think Charlie Sayers, right, too. He's bringing in guys through the academy, but there wasn't that much sort of homegrown recruitment that was happening from Paratici. And when you look at Steve Hitchens' sort of track record, his homegrown recruitment is absolutely dreadful. And you look at what did he bring in? Ryan Sessegnon, Jack Clark, Joe Rodon, Matt Doherty. There was plenty of really poor homegrown players that he had brought into this team that ended up having to qualify as homegrown and took up those very valuable spots in the team of the homegrown department. And Levy sort of had probably looked at it and was kind of panicking, about sort of maybe the last two directors of football, that maybe Paratici wasn't doing enough homegrown recruitment. And then in the case of Steve Hitchen, he was just useless when it came to recruitment in general, but especially when it came to his own homegrown recruitment. You really look at some of the money that he was throwing around at some of these guys that ended up not doing anything in a Spurs kid, especially Jack Clark. What was that, 15, 20 million that we ended up, wasting on that kid who ended up never even really playing any minutes whatsoever? Emerson Royale has played more minutes than even Ryan Sessegnon. Joe Rodon, we've loaned out, after maybe 1 6-month period, that was maybe okay with Jose Mourinho. Matt Doherty, I think you complained about till the cows came home, Dave. And you just look at sort of his, homegrown recruitment in comparison to what Aston Villa have been doing, comparison to what other clubs have been doing. I could see why Levy would be kind of panicking about, you know what, I feel almost okay. You're, pretty close to what I need in terms of kind of the foreign stars, that are not, qualifying as homegrown. But he has to start looking at, I need better representation in the homegrown department of actual guys that can challenge for the first team, challenge for the starting 11. And I think you're going to get that with these Villa guys. You're not going to get that with what we had earlier. It was just money wasted with what we had earlier. So I think it's a smart, actually set up by Levy in bringing in, if that's the plan, that they're going to improve the homegrown, recruitment massively. I think that's the plan. And I hope that is, because I think that's smart, because, look at the money we wasted under Hitchin. And also the lack of money we even spent under Paratici, which showed that maybe Paratici didn't have much confidence himself in his own homegrown recruitment.
No, look, Paratici, one thing I'll give the guy, is he really exploited that European market and got us some absolute gems out of there, and he's built that side of the squad. But I think we'll all agree, and when we look at it, right, we do lack in homegrown. Like you pointed out, Jack, it's something that hasn't been right for quite some time. A lot of the homegrown signings, something that we haven't got right for quite a period of time. And I'd argue, it's been a big part of why, of why we've been where we are the last 4 years, because that strength, in the homegrown department that we have to use, it just isn't there. For instance, contracts up, Fraser Forrester, Brandon Austin, homegrown players. So there are two that's out the door. Ben Davies up in 2025, along with Ryan Sessegnon, Joe Roden, Jaffet
Oh yeah,
Tanganga,
Darius
Troy
Young,
Parrott,
man.
Dyer's coming up as well. So, there's a lot of players that are of the homegrown quota that are actually registered of the squad, and you'd still argue, is Skip good enough, and stuff like that. So that is a huge area that really needs to be improved. And I think we spoke about this, right? The academy will go some way to doing it, but it's not going to be able to fill all the spots. So we do need to improve on that. And I genuinely think that's why someone like Lang has been brought in here to really improve that side of the squad.
Hmm.
That's where the focus will be. I wouldn't be surprised to see a homegrown player be brought in here in January, and probably another couple being brought in here in the summer.
Good.
Now,
Yeah.
I'm not saying there isn't any room for European signings. You've got Endon Belle's contract coming up in 2 years. Lascelles, Hugo Lloris is on his way out the door, stuff like that. Perisic could be gone in January. So that will free up some spaces in the foreign department. But the homegrown quota, in order for us to have a proper strong squad, we have to bring that homegrown quota. You look at Man City, Stones, Walker, Foden, people like that, right? You do have to rely on the homegrown talent. I genuinely believe this is the main reason why these guys are brought in here, because their ability to be able to pick players up on the cheap, but also being able to identify players from the Championship that have made the grade to the Premier League, where you're not spending the 60, over
Yeah.
50, 60 million that you're spending on someone like Brennan Johnson, who's
Yeah.
already of Premier League quality.
Well, that's what people have sort of complained about with homegrown recruitment is that, oh, it's so expensive. Like, look at the English tax that you have to put on these guys that aren't even that good, for the English tax that you have to put on them. It's like, well, that's why you bring in these guys like Lang. That's why you bring in these guys like McKenzie, because they're going to find you the next Dele Alli that you don't have to spend 30, 40 million on guys that nobody thinks are actually real talents yet, or maybe haven't actually taken a look at, properly. And that's what I'm hopeful of, is that they're going to bring in some more sort of Dele Alli, Kyle Walker when he was at Sheffield United, when nobody really looked at them as maybe real proven talents yet. And then we end up unearthing them, bringing them into Ange's system. And I think that could be sort of the tact here, because it's not really a smart sort of tactic to continue to spend 40, 50 million on sort of proven players like Brennan Johnson that everybody sort of already know about. And then you end up paying that huge English tax or huge homegrown tax that goes with it. I think, we hopefully are going to kind of lean more towards these kind of 3 million, 4 million, 5 million, 10 million kind of signings, maybe even less than that, of kind of guys that, we haven't even heard of that are maybe in the Championship. Maybe, for example, I know we didn't end up getting him, but, everyone was so obsessed with Alex Scott. What if we had gotten an Alex Scott before he even had that breakout season with Bristol City? We already did, have him kind of locked up in some sort of way. That's what I see Lange and these guys doing, and I'm absolutely all for it, because Spurs have absolutely been dreadful since the days of kind of, I would say, Dele Alli and those sort of homegrown recruitment that we had back then under Paul Mitchell. I would say that was the last time that you could say Spurs were really doing a good job in that area. So
But
it's
something
been a
Spurs
while.
had always done well, right? They identified Danny Rose from the academy, Kyle Walker, Garrett Bell, people like that. They always have done well in identifying the next maybe English players or the homegrown players and bring them in early and developing them. For instance, I just brought up the homegrown registration for our squad. Brandon Austin, Ben Davies, Fraser Forrester, Johnson, Madison, Sessegnon, Skip Whiteman. So bar Johnson and Madison, the rest can go. You're talking about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spots that are there to be filled, in my opinion, this season. You might get Donnelly and Darrington to take two of them, but then again, you don't have to register them if you don't want to. So, if you can fill them 6 spots, you don't have to register Darrington and Donnelly, but they can still play for the senior team. So that's the next area that really needs to be brought up to par of the squad, and that's why, like we said, Jack, I genuinely believe that's why these guys are here. Do I still think they're going to work on the Paratici's directive? I think so. I think, Paratici is still the head honcho, even though he's an
Could it be
advisor.
like a dual scenario, like Lange, bit more homegrown recruitment, bit more kind of focused in that area? Paratici still kind of looking for those big, kind of European signings and sort of the markets and connections that he has there? Could they be working a bit more separately, but also in tandem?
Yeah, I think so. I think so, Jack. I think Paratici will look after maybe the European markets unless Lang has one or two. But Lang, I think more so him and he's Rob McKenzie, Leth. I think they're all here to sort of concentrate on the
Okay.
homegrown. But also a big part of it, Jack, is getting players out the door. Last season, this summer we really sort of failed to push players out the door. The likes of Dyer or Larice, when there were offers on the table, there was no one really standing there as a director of football saying, look, there ain't nothing here for you this season. Get out. You're better off. Basically trying to force the issue. Someone like Gabonini was never really going to do that because he didn't have the official title,
Mm.
even though he was acting as a director of football. So I definitely think there's a part to also getting these players out. I think they're the two that I'm focused on is the homegrown and getting players out the door so we can really get a squad that's able to compete next season on all four fronts.
Completely agree. And unless you have any other points, then, I think we'll leave it there. Everybody, that's, I think, the message behind this is get behind, Lange, get behind the McKenzie and this new kind of Villa recruitment team, because I think they're here to fix our homegrown issues. Because if you haven't looked at it already and if you haven't thought about it, we have some pretty dreadful sort of talent in sort of those areas right now. We have a wonderful academy, and I'm looking forward to those guys filling in those homegrown spots. But if you look at the current spots in the squad, that are being occupied by homegrown players. I think
Three
it's a,
goalkeepers.
I mean, it's a joke, and I think guys like Lange are going to do a good job in repairing that. And let's hope so that it's the right decision made by all. But we'll leave you there. Hit that like button, please. Leave a comment down below if there's anything that you like from this discussion. Is there anything that you want to see us discuss next time around? And we will be seeing you. Come on, you Spurs. In the big Ange we trust. We never stop.
We never stop.
Everywhere we go.